Okay, let's talk about these Falcons. Should the Falcons be more than NFC South favorites after the additions of Matthew Judon and Justin Simmons? And Zach, once more, the mic is you.
Yeah, well, let me just start off by saying this, man. I love this topic because we were on the air last week when the Judon trade went down. We reacted live. I always love when that happens. But I just think this Falcons team is in such a unique spot because even though Raheem Morris is going into his first year as a head coach, I think we're all going to agree, like, there's some pressure on this team to win right away in his first year. Not only because the NFC South is a wide open division, I think they're the most talented team in the division, especially after these moves. But this Falcons team has just kind of been irrelevant since they blew that big 28-3 lead in the Super Bowl. They only made the playoffs one time since that happened, and it was the year right after that. They did win a playoff game that year, but lost in the second round to Nick Foles and the Eagles. But I just think when it comes to this Falcons team, they have to win the NFC South, or this is going to be a failure of a season. They just spent big money on Kirk Cousins. They just made this big trade for Judon. We know how many talented skill position players this team has taken in the top of the draft in recent years, right? From Bijan Robinson to Kyle Pitts to Drake London. Their offensive line, they've used some premium assets on that. I also really think their defense should be good. I think their defense was an underrated unit last year. I know they lost their defensive coordinator, Ryan Nielsen. He went to Jacksonville, but I feel like the coaching in general for this team should be better with Raheem Morris and Zach Robinson. We know both those guys did very good work with the Rams under Sean McVay, including winning a Super Bowl. So I do think the expectations in Atlanta should be pretty high. And I do think they should be NFC South favorites. More than that, I wouldn't say so. I don't think they're really worthy just yet of being on the same tier as some of the other top teams in the NFC. And it's because of the quarterback position. I know they just paid Kirk Cousins, but I still think there are a lot of question marks with him coming off the torn Achilles going into this season. And really, Lil, I know this wasn't directly part of the question, but I think the most interesting storyline around the Atlanta Falcons right now isn't the moves they just made of Judon and Simmons. It's the fact that they just announced Michael Penix, the guy that they just drafted in the first round. He just sat out randomly of their second preseason game against the Ravens, and he's not going to be playing in their third preseason game against the Jaguars. And I'm just telling you right now, I have a theory why. I think it's because of the fact that everyone in this team's building knows that they're under pressure to not only win, but win the division this year and make the playoffs. And if Kirk Cousins doesn't start off good, then you know there are going to be chants and there's going to be chatter saying Michael Penix should be this team's quarterback. And I think the Falcons organization and leadership was a little bit worried that if they put Penix out there in the preseason and he's just throwing darts, looking like the guy we saw at Washington last year, lead the Huskies to the national championship game, then they're going to have a legitimate quarterback controversy. And to be honest, I don't know if not playing Penix is going to solve that issue, because I saw Michael Penix in his first preseason game against the Dolphins, and he looked like Michael Penix, the guy that led Washington to the national championship game. So I think that's the most interesting part of this Falcons team. I think they're super talented. I think they should be NFC South favorites. I think the expectations for this team should be pretty high, and they should make the playoffs. But the quarterback position is a question mark, because if Kirk Cousins doesn't play well, or if he doesn't look like the guy that we saw last year, and by the way, I said it in my quarterback rankings, that's why I had Kirk Cousins at number 20, which is much lower than anyone else would have him, is because I think there's some serious question marks in this Falcons quarterback room. And if he doesn't play well, then the calls are going to start coming for Penix. And I think that's the most interesting part of this Falcons team going into the season.
Yeah, I agree. I don't think they should be nothing more than NFC South favorites. After the moves, right? We can categorize this after the moves they made thus far throughout the offseason, not just only the Matthew Judons and the Justin Simmons moves, right? But I think it puts in perspective for me something that I didn't think about, which was it confirms, if anything today, right now, what it confirms is that Raheem Morris was the better hire over Bill Belichick. And I'm going to tell you why. Because player relations in the NFL is obviously very important. We talked about Brian Flores. Obviously, he didn't have that player relation with Tua. I'm not sure about how the NFL views him outside of Tua, but player relations are important. And it's hard to find a head coach more popular amongst the players around the league than Raheem Morris. I mean, maybe Mike Tomlin, Dan Campbell, and that's probably it. I'm talking about the respect. Like even a guy like Jalen Ramsey, he's very decorated. We know that. And he always politics for this guy. So that's very important. Guys are going to want to come to play for this team. Matthew Judon, when he got traded, he had an option, go to the Bears or and play with a rookie quarterback who has star potential and build over there, or play for Raheem Morris. He chose Raheem Morris. Okay. Justin Simmons, he signed with Raheem Morris. So player relations are very important. It's very important. And that's another reason why I think that, they made the right hire here, because unfortunately, despite his resume, industrious resume, guys are not lining up to play for Bill Belichick. It's called a spade. They don't even want to play for him anymore. He's a dinosaur in this league, and it's not 1999 anymore. So that's a good hire. Now, I do think as far as defensively, before I address the quarterback situation there, I think defensively they should be better. On paper, they should. I mean, obviously, they're going to switch their scheme. I don't think they're going to be playing a lot of press. I think they're going to be playing more cover 3-4, more, obviously because of the secondary that they got. And I think that having a guy like Matthew Judon, who is an edge rusher, you need to get pressure on the quarterback. That's a main thing right there. You need to get pressure. You need to put the quarterback on his back. Okay, he's going to help you do that. He's a game wrecker. And you have a guy in Simmons who could be paired along Jesse Bates. I believe the Falcons were the worst team in takeaways. They didn't get a lot of takeaways last year, a lot of interceptions. That should change this year, and that should give the offense more opportunities. Now, coming to the offense now, and that Michael Penix situation that I briefly want to talk about real quickly here. I still am a little bit spotty with the pick in general. I still am, because of not only the value of the pick, but the fact that you got a guy in Kirk Cousins who you gave $100 million to. Okay, like to me, that's a little bit risky. However, I do see a world in which having insurance is something that you should have. Everybody need to have insurance, life insurance. I am a life insurance agent, by the way. Hit my line if you need life insurance, right? House insurance, car insurance, right? We all need some type of insurance, phone insurance, computer insurance, right? So I get it. Quarterback insurance is definitely up the list there, right? So I get that point. However, I think when you really want to look at this decision to not play Michael Penix the last two preseason games, I don't agree with that either, but I can just give you a perspective of why that may be the case, like how you gave me. And I think for me, you look at Raheem Morris, he came from the Sean McVay tree, and what we know about Sean McVay, he doesn't like to play his guys. Granted, Michael Penix is not starting. He's going to be on the bench probably for about a year or two, right? But that's their program, and he came from that. And it has worked for Sean McVay. He won a lot of home openers or season openers, and they're very hot. The Rams are in the beginning of the year. There's a reason for that, because that adopting format of handling the preseason game works for him. And I think Raheem Morris took a page out of that book, even if it doesn't make sense to me. I just want to give you perspective on what I think and why that decision was made. I still think Michael Penix should have been playing to get reps. That's how I think you get better. But unfortunately, as we've been saying to start up the show, look at the show title, it's not 1999 anymore. And there's a lot of bizarre things and a lot of bizarre changes going around the NFL right now. And this is one of them.
My issue with that theory, though, is the purpose of Sean McVay not playing his starters in the preseason is to make sure they're healthy and on the field ready to go week one. And Michael Penix, as we know, is not going to be on the field week one. Like, the reason why I was so excited about watching Penix in the preseason was because I know that in most situations, he's probably not going to take the field this year. So you got to take advantage of these opportunities. And the fact that they're just not playing him, it really just tells me that I think the Falcons are kind of a little worried about Kirk Cousins. And they know that if he struggles early, the conversation around this team is going to be, we want Penix, because there is clear pressure on this team to win. We both agree they should win the NFC South. They're the favorites in that division, rightfully so. They're the most talented team. This team hasn't made the playoffs since 2018. They're a joke. They're really known for blowing a 28-3 lead in the Super Bowl in historic fashion. And I do think if they were to do it over again, they probably would have passed on paying Kirk Cousins and just drafted Penix. But what happened was they wanted Cousins because they had a huge question mark at the quarterback position. They paid him. And after they decided to do that, they scouted and watched Michael Penix. And just like everyone who watched him at Washington last year, they realized, like, man, this guy is the real deal. And he has a chance to be a very good player in this league one day. And the thing about Penix is he's ready to play right now. He's 26 years old. You just watch him in the pocket, and he's firing. Watching him in that preseason game against the Dolphins, he looked like the same exact guy we all saw at Washington. So I think that this team and this organization, although they're super talented, although overall I do really like their offseason, I agree with you. I think Raheem Morris was a very good hire. But it all depends on the quarterback position, and they still have a major question mark there.
And I think the quarterback conversation actually ties into the way how I'm answering this question about them not being the favorites beyond just the NFC South. And that's because with that pick they had, they could have gotten another player that addressed a need that could have made them even more on paper a team that looks destined to accomplish a Super Bowl run.
Interesting. So let me ask you this: if they would have taken Rome Odunze, or I don't know what player you had in mind, would you
probably Rome Odunze would probably be one of those guys that come on the top of a defensive player?
Would you feel differently about them?
Yeah, I would definitely be like, this team is stacked. I don't know if that pick would have just Super Bowl because of Rome Odunze, but it would have been like, all right, there's a lot of talent here. They should be, Kirk Cousins, or you're a captain or not. That's why I would look at it, because if he is a captain, then I think that's enough to really go on a run, and I think they could have used another weapon. It doesn't hurt, so taking a pick that high and drafting a backup quarterback whom is going to be your backup, we assume, for at least 1 to 2 years pending Kirk Cousins' performance. Because if Kirk Cousins really takes this as motivation and lights up the field like Aaron Rodgers did when they drafted Jordan Love, then of course we're probably going to see Kirk Cousins next year. It's really all talent to Kirk Cousins. I'm pretty sure they're not just going to pull him out with all that money they giving him just because the crowd is like, we want Penix. No, you win the games. Shut up. Okay? Like, what are you talking about? All right? So I do think that pick could have been used for a better player.
I'm going to pull up the Falcons schedule right now. And off the top of my head, I do think that they actually start the season with a pretty tough stretch. I'm going to pull it up right now. So listen to this. The Falcons will start the season at home against the Steelers. It's probably a game they should win. Arthur Smith going up against his former team. Storylines write themselves. But then their next two games, both in primetime, by the way, at the Eagles on Monday Night Football and then hosting the Chiefs on Sunday Night Football. I mean, that Steeler game, they should win it. It's not a guarantee. Like, I think there's a chance they could get off to a slow start and the conversations could really begin.
I mean, it's possible, but are we going to bench Kirk Cousins for losing to Patrick Mahomes? I don't think so. So, a lot of teams are going to have tough schedules. I mean, for the most part, because the league is really good this year.
This team has to win the division, or else it's a failure of a season. I agree. Cousins is not. Yeah, he's not getting benched after 3 games. But what I'm saying is, I could see him struggling in those games and the conversation beginning. And then when we get to Halloween or Thanksgiving and the Buccaneers are beating them and they're in first place, I think that's when we might be having real conversations. I always say this about the NFL, and that's why I love this sport. It doesn't matter how much money you're making. It doesn't matter where you were drafted. It doesn't matter who you are. If you are not producing for long enough, you're bound to get replaced, no matter who you are. We saw.
I mean, tell that to Mike Tomlin, right?
Okay, besides Pittsburgh.
Yeah, exactly.
So hey, like, you got to produce, especially in a situation like this, where I do think if Michael Penix was the Falcons quarterback, like, I'd be feeling pretty good about them. I think he's fully capable of going in right away and having success, especially based on the situation he's in. So that's all I'm going to say. Like, I'm saying it right now. If Kirk Cousins struggles early on in the season and this team isn't leading the division and they're not looking good on the offensive side of the ball, then I'm going to make it known that I want Penix as this team's starting quarterback. And I think many people in the city of Atlanta would agree with me.
Yeah, and I think that's a good insurance, policy to have. And whenever we do see Michael Penix, hopefully that one game was not the last of what we are going to see from him for the next 2 years. That's the unfortunate part of this. If, the plan is really cut and dry like that the plan is to have him sit for a couple years, and that would just be a terrible. I can't understand the logic. That's why I think you feel this way, that there has to be more to that. Maybe Penix is playing sooner, because you can't even fathom the logic of just having him play one game to sit for 2 years.
Right. Like, well, both of us have watched a lot of preseason football, and I'm trying to think of an example off the top of my head. Like Bo Nix, for example, right? He's looked very good in the Broncos' first 2 preseason games. Let's say Michael Penix did the exact same thing, and we were talking about him and how good he was looking. And then Kirk Cousins goes out there to start the season and struggles. Like, what the conversation is going to be. It's the NFL. The next Monday morning, if the Falcons, start 1-2 or 0-3 and they lose because of Cousins, we all know what the conversation is going to be. And yeah, if you draft a 26-year-old quarterback in the first round, the plan better not be to have him sit for 2 years. So I actually do think there's a decent chance we see Penix get on the field this year. I really do.
I mean, it's a toss-up, right? Because, like, yeah, they don't want to deal. I guess your point is they don't want to deal with the hoopla of the crowd saying we want Penix and Kirk Cousins is not good, because they're going to feel pressure to put Michael Penix in the game. But I could counter that. That pick we all knew was going to, and they knew it was going to be criticized to begin with, which it was, and they still made the pick. So I don't really think it's a fair of perception with them, because they made one of the head-scratching decisions of all time. Whether it works out for them in due time or not, it still was very scrutinized, and they knew it was going to be, and they went for it. And we'll see what the plan is. I'm just a little bit complex about him not playing and getting these reps in the preseason.
So am I, and that's why I came up with this theory. And by the way, like I agree. I don't think it's gonna work. Like, no matter how Michael Penix looks in the preseason, whether he plays one game, which he is, or he lights it up in the preseason, I just think when you take a quarterback with that big of a pick, like, the conversations are going to begin. Like, this team has a quarterback controversy. Let's just call it what it is.
With all due respect, I mean, I didn't watch that preseason game. I saw the highlights because obviously the games are coming on at the same time. I saw the highlight. My guy made one throw. So you mean to tell me, that one throw? Oh my God, we got to bench this guy. Okay, we don't need to see no more. That's it. Cut up the lights. It's over. That one throw up the sideline that was pretty accurate. I'll give him that. Oh, that's it. We don't need to see no more. Like, no.
I mean, he went 9 for 16, 104 yards. I mean, he looked pretty good to me. Had a 41-yard pass. I think that's the one you're referring to. But it's not because only the preseason. It's because you took him in the first round. He just led his team to the national championship game.
I don't know, man. The Falcons are a little bit, and that's why to categorize their offseason, even with the great moves that they made, because I like the defensive moves more so than any of the offensive moves when you really think about it. Yeah, I mean, obviously addressing the quarterback was important, but I really like the defensive moves. But you can categorize these moves in totality, just complex, like good, but complex. Like, it's really, that's why I can't really sip the Kool-Aid of a Super Bowl, because there's a lot of complexity here. And I think for me, where I would leave it is I like the fact that they're addressing defense too, because this has been a team the last couple of years that has turned a blind eye to the defense, right? And that's reflective in their defense, literally in the stats and in the takeaways and stuff like that. Now, to be able to address that this season and have a balanced roster, anything short of an NFC South championship is a failure.
And what happens if Kirk Cousins starts the season and it's not looking like that's going to happen? It puts them in an interesting spot. That's all I'll say.
Please like and subscribe for all the up-to-date content. You've been slinging shows left and right, slinging content left and right. Please don't miss anything. If you do, like, subscribe, leave a comment, or leave a question, something you may want to answer, something you may have. All ideas are great ideas. Nothing's a dumb question.